We now need to take a look at setting up a static IP address for the Raspberry Pi. So why a static IP address? Well, the obvious reason is so that we will always know what our Pi's IP address is. Personally, when I am working on Pi projects, I just want to plug it in and get going building whatever I am working on. I don't want to have to connect the Pi to a display so that I can find out what IP address my router's DHCP server is assigning to it. Yes, I could also log on to my router's web admin panel and find out, but I don't want to have to do that either. In fact, I want to be able to print a label on my Pi's case with the IP address on it. So how do we do this? How do we get a static IP address? There are two ways we can get our Pi to use a static IP address. The option that I prefer is to use the address reservation feature on my router. The reason I prefer this method is so I can easily move my Pi from the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, and my internal network, and then back again, back to the DMZ. Using address reservation on the router, I don't have to make any changes to the configuration files on the Pi before I move it. I don't have to connect the Pi to a monitor just to find out what the IP address is. I already know the IP address that my router is going to assign to it. I will show you how I do this on my internal networks router. For my internal network, I use a TP-Link router. Setting it up on the various makes and models of routers that are out there will vary, but for the most part, it should be quite similar to set it up on your router. Before I show you how to do that, we will need one piece of information. We need the actual MAC address of our Raspberry Pi. It's very easy to get. From the command line, you will type ifconfig and press enter. So we are looking for the ether address. So in my case, I need to make note of 00:E0:4C:0C:0C:13. E7. So let's switch over to my router's web admin panel. And as you can see, I have already logged in. I'm already in the DHCP settings, and I've went to the address reservation section. So the thing to note here is the way in which the MAC addresses are being displayed. They don't have the colons. Instead, they use dashes. So let's go ahead and add our MAC address and give it an IP address that we want to use. So I'm going to say add new, and I'm going to go back to my notes of where I put my MAC address, and I'm going to do 00. And again, we want to use a hyphen here. So then we're going to do E0-4C-0C-13-E7. So the reserved IP address that I want to give it is 192.168.1.87. And let's say enabled. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so now that we've got the MAC address in there and told it which IP address we want to reserve, we need to go ahead and reboot the router. So I'm going to go ahead and do that this time. Okay, so I just restarted the router, and now we need to go ahead and restart the Raspberry Pi as well. Before we do, take note of the IP address that is currently assigned, that is 192.168.1.106. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot with the sudo reboot command. And then, of course, it wants the password. So after it restarts, we will take a look and see what the IP address is. Okay, so the Pi has restarted, and I can already tell that the router has assigned the 192.168.1.87 address to the Raspberry Pi because it's on the screen above the login. So like I said, this is how I prefer to assign a static IP address to my Pi. There is another method. If you don't have the ability to make changes to your router's configuration, you will have to use the configuration files, the dhcpd.conf file, to assign a static IP address to your Pi. So let me go ahead and disable the option for assigning the IP address via address reservation on my router, and then I'll come back and I will show you how to do it within the config files on the Pi.